Welcome to Church Girlz Chatz. My name is Jasmine Ford, and I'm the president and founder of Church Girlz Incorporated. Right now we're on a series called Am I Good Enough, where we're diving into different topics that may have caused us to subconsciously make decisions out of insecurities that we've never dealt with. I want you guys to go read an article this week that was called Am I Light Enough? If you haven't read it, go click the link in the description box and then come back to this video. So this week's theme is saying that our skin color can serve a purpose for God's glory to advance His kingdom if we allow it to. In Romans 8:28 it says, "And for those who love God, all things work together for the good, for those who are called according to His purpose." Well, the thing is, we can't allow that thing to be used for His purpose if we don't release it to Him. We like the excitement of that verse of God will use everything, but we have to give it to Him. He's not just going to snatch it from us. We have to relinquish it to us, and sometimes we don't. And in our society, and just as humans in general, a lot of times we like to do this superior inferior game. We like to always find a reason to make another group feel inferior. And some people have bought into the lies of feeling inferior. Some people bought into the lies of being superior. And it don't matter what dynamic, you can put any two things in there. This week I talked about being dark skinned. So it can be the dark skin, light skin thing, superior, inferior. It could be black and white, superior, inferior. It could be rich and poor. It could be American and non-Americans. You know, we don't want to fall in either one of those categories, because when we do that, we then put ourselves in a position where we can't allow God to truly make what our ministry, our assignment, our purpose, whatever you want to call it, we won't be able to let Him take us as far as He wants to take us, and we'll come short. At some point, we have to renew our mind in the Word and kick out those thoughts. Kick out the thoughts of I'm inferior. Kick out the thoughts of I feel superior. And a lot of times we don't even know they're there. Most times, like I said last week, they're hidden in our subconscious thoughts, and we need the Holy Spirit to bring them out so we can deal with them. So this week, I'm going to use Peter and Paul from the Bible as an example of why we need to renew our minds when it comes to this superior, inferior thing. So let me give you a quick history lesson. Peter, for those of you who don't know, Peter was a disciple of Jesus. He had a boat, he was a fisherman, and God said, "I'll make you fisher of men." He's the one who denied Jesus 3 times. He cut the man's ear off. He was always ready to get rah-rah with people. And God really built His church upon Peter. And Peter was the one, once Jesus ascended back to heaven, who went out and began the churches back then. He began to preach the gospel everywhere, him and the other disciples. He was like, head honcho back then. So he was a Jew, and let's get that straight. He was a Jew, and back in that time, Jews and Gentiles were superior, inferior group again. Jews were superior, Gentiles were inferior. Now Paul was also a Jew, except Paul was one of those Jews who couldn't stand Peter at first because they were preaching the gospel. So he got permission from authorities to kill off all Christians who were preaching the gospel and were trying to get rid of Jewish traditions. One day on his way to another killing spree, God stopped him. He repented. His heart got turned towards God. And ever since then, he's been like a radical Christian, willing to go to the depths of the earth for Jesus to preach the gospel. Those are the two people we're talking about today. So let's get straight into it in Galatians chapter 2, and we'll start in verse 7. And I'm going to read it. I got my Bible today. And so let's read it and see what I'm talking about. So, and this is Paul speaking. Paul wrote a lot of the Bible, a lot of the New Testament. He was like, that guy as well. Instead, they saw that God had given me the responsibility of preaching the gospel to the Gentiles, just as He has given Peter the responsibility of preaching to the Jews. For the same God who worked through Peter as the apostle to the Jews, superior, also worked through me as the apostle to the Gentiles, inferior. In fact, James, Peter, and John, who were known as pillars of the church, recognized the gift God had given me, and they accepted Barnabas and me as their co-workers. They encouraged us to keep preaching to the Gentiles while they continued their work with the Jews. Let's skip down. But when Peter came to Antioch, I had to oppose him to his face, for what he did was very wrong. When he first arrived, he ate with the Gentile believers who were not circumcised. But afterward, when some friends of James, who were Jews, came, Peter wouldn't eat with the Gentiles anymore. He was afraid of criticism from these people who insisted on the necessity of circumcision. As a result, other Jewish believers followed Peter's hypocrisy, and even Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy. I don't know why I say that word wrong. Guys, I can read. I just never get, you know those words that trip you up? That's one of them, hypocrisy. I know it's hypocrite, hypocrisy. Child. Anyway. So, let me tell y'all what that really was about. So let's think about those middle school movies where it was that pretty popular girl, and somehow she becomes friends with the nerdy guy in science class, and you know, they start to build a bond, and it's like, okay, yeah, I like you pretty good. And then when the other popular kids come, she started acting like, oh no, I don't want to hang out with him anymore. Like, no, I wasn't hanging out with him. That's not my friend. I'm part of the popular crew. That's what Peter just did right then. Like, he was being mad fake. Like, that's what he did. It said he was being fake. That's what he did. So, back during that time, there was tradition that Jews and Gentiles weren't even supposed to sit down and eat. So it was a big deal he did that. And he's being the leader for God, being the front runner. You got to stick to your guns. God was already dealing with Peter about this. God had told him, don't call anything unclean that I called clean. And he was talking about the Gentiles. And he was beginning to renew his mind, but he stopped short. Soon as pressure came from the other Jews, instead of him rising up to be an example and speaking out, as we were say today, he stopped short. And he went back to their old ways, and there's a lot of consequences because of that. It says that he was trying to keep having them follow their traditions. And that's a problem, because in Matthew 15, verses 7 through 9, Jesus is speaking, and he says, what Isaiah prophesied about you was right when he wrote, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship is a farce, for they teach man-made ideas as commands from God. And that's what was happening here. That's what happened before Jesus came, and that's the whole point of Jesus coming. Get rid of these traditions, and you can come to God. You guys all can come to God. We're saved by faith through grace. And he was trying to turn back in that moment. And there was a lot of consequences. So the Jews were put into more bondage again. They didn't get their example in that moment that Peter should have set, because Peter did not continue to renew his mind of feeling superior to the Gentiles. That's what it really comes down to. Even though those aren't the words they use, that's what it comes down to. He felt more superior. And then Barnabas was turned away from the church. There was a lot of consequences. So the Jews felt like they're justified for keep feeling superior. Barnabas was turned away and said, I don't want to do this. So now you make someone stray. The other Gentiles, I'm sure the Gentiles were sitting there like, wait, you were just telling us about Jesus and how everything's fine, and now you're trying to like act funny when we come around. So I'm sure it made them hard to be okay with Christ as well, being like, if this is his representative, I don't know if I want anything to do with that. There were a lot of consequences because of that. And how many times current day have the church or people from the church, well, we are the church, so we don't even have to say a specific church or building, we're the church. How many times have the church harmed people because they have not let go of their old ways of tradition and customs and feeling superior than someone because they feel like I'm a seasoned Christian? That's what happened. And it happened then, and it's happening now, and it's time for it to be cut out. It's time to renew our minds around it. And the Bible says in Matthew chapter 18, verse 6, it says, but if you cause one of these little ones who trust in me to fall into sin, it would be better for you to have a large millstone tied around your neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. God takes it serious when you cause someone to stumble because of your own sin or lack of renewing your mind or whatever it is that you're doing. No, you need to be an example, especially when you're more mature. And so there's a lot of consequences that Peter had to face because of that. Peter was a great man, and I'm not trying to knock his ministry. It was wonderful, but I dare to say how much further could it have went if he continued to renew his mind with that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to talk about Peter. Peter's a great guy. Peter's just human like all of us, but we're not we're supposed to be like Jesus. We're supposed to go further. And you know who's a good example of that? Paul. So let me tell you about Paul. Because like I said earlier, Paul was that dude. He was the man. You know why? Even though at first he was crazy. So, you know, when he got saved, he was like, I need to make sure I really go above and beyond because I was killing y'all off at first. So now let me make sure, you know, I'm right with the Lord. He truly renewed his mind in this area. He truly did. So he didn't see Jew and Gentile. He seen we're all a part of the body of Christ. And he said, whatever it takes to get you to come to Christ and get the gospel to you, I'm going to do it. I don't see it that way. He was a Jew himself. And he said, I'm not seeing it that way. So he called Peter out. And I say we need to be like Paul. We don't want to be like Peter. But then even if we're not like Peter and who feel that superior thing and come short because of that, we also need pause. Right now, there's a lot going on in our society against racism and stuff. And a lot of people are upset about people who are silent. Paul could have been silent in this moment, but instead what he do? It says he called Peter out in front of everyone. Now, I'm not saying that you need to do that because back in the day, they did some stuff that I don't know is acceptable today. Like, I don't think I'm calling somebody out in front of everybody. Like, I'm not doing that. But he called him out and said, you're wrong for this. Where he could have kept silent and said, you know, Peter is Peter. Peter, God called him to start the church. He's the rock. He's I don't want to say anything. Paul said, I don't care. That's wrong. And I'm going to stick to what the gospel says. And what you're doing right now is not the true gospel. Why are you doing that? We need to be like Paul. That's what I say. I say we need to be like Paul. Because Paul, I'm not trying to compare their ministries. By no means. They were called to two different things. Like it says, Peter was called to be the apostle for the Jews. Paul was called to be the apostle for the Gentiles. But that doesn't mean that you stay in that bubble. You reach your hand across. Although Peter was called to be the apostle for the Jews, you still have to mend everything with the Gentiles. You know why? Because you're also an example. But you being an apostle, you have to sit there and let them see you. So now they say like, oh, we need to do that too. You can be a called to one thing. That doesn't mean that everyone else is isolated. But I want to be like Paul. That's my bottom line. I want to be like Paul because Paul was able to preach to Jews, Gentiles. He went from country to country preaching the gospel. He never cared what anyone thought. If people try to think less of him, I don't care. You're not going to make me feel inferior. If people try to put him on this pedestal, listen, he said, listen, I'm the least of you. I don't deserve to even be able to preach the gospel because of my past. So he never put himself, he made sure if anyone tried to make him feel inferior, he did it. If he tried to make you feel superior, he said, no, 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 no. I'm just a servant. I'm a slave of Christ. I'm a servant of God. He was able to preach everywhere because he killed those stereotypes in his head. He wouldn't allow anyone to put you in one of these two categories that humans are constantly trying to do. He preached in jail. He preached when he was free. He preached to the prison guards. He preached to the other prisoners. He preached on the boat. He didn't care. I'm going to preach wherever I go. And that was his assignment. And we're not all called to preach the gospel. We're not all called to be ministers, apostles, or whatever. But we are called to our own individual field, no matter what it is. And in that field, how are you showing up? Because we can all say, I don't feel no type way. I don't feel superior to anyone. But sometimes, like I said, it's so subconscious, you're blinded to it. And you know what? The other group feels it. They feel it. They feel like you can sit here and smile and love them and it can even be one of your friends who you feel superior to. And no one may ever say it, but people can feel that. People will feel that. And we don't want that to be. I don't want to be only attracting one group of audience. I don't want church girls to only be girls who look like me. I want it to be able to reach everyone. Now, if God said, I'm assigning you to a specific group, and I do have an audience God called me to, more so than age. But I don't want to be, oh, I can't talk to, like, I don't know if I can reach people who are a different race, or who aren't in America, or who just know God and they don't get it. No, I'm preaching. I want to be able to reach anyone, and then God assigns me to who I am, and then within that group, I can spread. I want to be like Paul. I want to be like Paul. I dare to say that God knew exactly who I was from the beginning. He did it on purpose. In the Bible, it says that God said, I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. So he knew me, and then he called me to earth. You don't just show up here. God has to call you. So he said, Jasmine, I'm going to have her come to earth to be born in 1994 so that in 2018, she can launch Church Girlz. he could have said the 1800s, but he chose when I came. So that means my age is for a reason. I want you to be in this family in America. Okay. And then he knew I was going to be black. So I want her to be born in this time and be African American. You know what? I want her to be dark skinned. So she'll be born in this time, a dark skinned African American young lady. God did it on purpose. I believe he did it on purpose. And you guys someone can say it's far-fetched. I believe it. God said, I'll work all things together for your good. This is all things. God don't do stuff just because like, oh, that seems like a good idea. Like, let me just do that. No, there's a purpose in it. Now, I'm not saying that's always leading the way. For some people, that is their assignment to deal with racial issues and different issues like that. But even if that's not your direct assignment from God, it still can be used if you allow him to. I made a decision a long time ago. I am for who I am for a reason. And it doesn't mean I'm superior or inferior to anyone. It just is. If you read my article, you see that's what my mom said. Because you are. You just are. There's no big mystery. There's no big study that needs to be done. You just are, and it's a part of my purpose. And I believe that the way I look and who I am and where I live have all to do, can all come together for God's glory, to advance his kingdom. And that's where our minds need to be. If I need to advance his kingdom. Even when I worked, right? I graduated from college, I got a job. Now, thank God for all jobs, but there's a purpose on those jobs, and it's not always comfortable. I know that who I am, when I walk into a space, sometimes I'm rattling some things up. I know when I get into spaces where God hasn't been, I'm supposed to be that in that space. I know that devil's like, oh my gosh, here she come again. And he's bothering me. So I went to a space where no one looks like me. No one was black. No one was my age. Everyone was older. You know, there was hardly any females. And it was difficult at times. And I sat here and said, all right, God, you got me in this space. What you want me to do? I know you're here to teach me. I know I'm here to learn myself, but what can I do while you're teaching me? Why I'm getting something for my future? Why I'm getting something for my purpose, to be developed as a leader and be developed as a business owner and be developed as just have career mindset. While I'm learning in this space, what can I give to you? How can I make sure your will's done in this space? God showed me. You don't only, of course, first and foremost, we represent God, but I also represent who God made me. And like I said, I'm a young black woman. Now, should that always be my lead out? No. But in that space, okay. So let me show up well. Let me speak. Let me conduct myself well. Let me speak well. Let me make sure I'm doing good at my job. And God favored me on that job to make sure on a regular, my head was popping up where it was like my name was talking. It was buzzing. And people would try to bring it back down because they weren't feeling me. And the Bible says we don't fight against flesh and blood, but by the unseen world. And I have to remember that sometimes, because I'll be ready to like, bro, he better get out my face. I'm not gonna lie, that's how I was be. Like, he needs to get out my face. But I have to remember I'm on assignment. And so that means whoever's being used, allowing the enemy to use them, they're going to keep bothering me. It shows in a human form. They're going to keep bothering me to discourage me so I can run off. No, I'm here to stay, and I'm going to do well so that when I leave, there's someone else like me who can get an opportunity. So it can be like, you know what, Jasmine did well. I'm going to give this next guy an opportunity. I'm going to give, whether they're a minority or a female or just fresh out of college with no experience, I'm going to give them opportunity because I took a chance once with Jasmine. And the chance really was because God favored me. Like, that's what it come down to. God put me on the job. So now somebody else, I'm going to give them a chance. And I'm not going to hush about it. We know that in corporate America, yes, sometimes people don't get opportunities because the way they look. They may have an accent. They may have a darker complexion. They may be like a foreign person. We know it happens. And I don't believe that the church should turn a blind eye and say, oh, we don't see it, or you just pray about it. If that's not where you're supposed to be, God, Like, that's the case sometimes, but sometimes, no, there's real deal issues going on in this world, and we have the answer. We have the answer, and we can make a change. I know that no matter where I go, God's going to favor me. So and everybody doesn't know that who looks like me. So wherever I go, I'm a tread a path. I'm gonna sit here and do well. And I believe I may never know it until I get to heaven. I believe since I left that job, since that I was done with that job, and I hope I left a good impression. I did what I could and did the best I could. I pray that someone came behind me and got an opportunity because I was there, because I left a good impression, and they may have not give this young man or this young lady an opportunity, but because I was there first, that's what happened. And that's how I say I used what I look like, who I am, as a way for God's will to be done. It may be someone who's supposed to be the president and CEO of that company one day, but I needed to go first to kind of handle with and break some of those stereotypes and break some of those things that's in their traditions and their culture at that job, just so this guy can come through and make his way to the top. It's not always about us. And that's the same thing that Paul's seen. It's not always about me. So he was able to preach to anyone. I don't want to fall short. I don't want to mess up like Peter. And trust me, God's been dealing with me about this all year. And I've come a long way, and I still have a long way to go, because you know, you can feel some type way about other people who are different from you. You can feel some type way if you had experience where it's like, they didn't treat me right, so I really don't want to fool with you. But it's okay. We have to renew our mind and say, you know, I'm not fighting against flesh and blood. Let me fight the enemy, because behind all of that ridiculousness, it's the enemy. And I'm not trying to make it sound super spiritual, like, oh, it's the devil, it's the devil. But it's the truth. It's the enemy. If he did it back then and he's doing it now, like, we have the answer. Let's change it. Colorism, racism, all of the stuff, these different social classes of feeling superior because I'm, you know, just, we see it all the time. And a lot of times we're in the mix of it. And a lot of times we like it because it might be some kind of insecurity in us to feel like I'm here and they're there. And people make posts about it all the time. You know, you got to get on my level. You got to da-da-da-da-da. And people say stuff all the time, and that's where their heart is. And we can't feel like that. It needs to feel like, come on up. And not even come up, because it's not like I'm here and you're there. But let me encourage you for us to both be doing well in our lane. But even if I'm doing super successful in what I'm doing, and you're not really doing well, it still don't mean I'm superior to you. In Galatians chapter 3, verse 28, it says, there is no longer Jew or Gentile, slave or free, male and female, we can add in there, black or white, dark skin, light skin, rich, poor, African American. For you are all one in Christ Jesus. Jesus said it. He said it. God said it. And who are we to change it? And it's not like people act like it just happens. Oh, I feel differently. No, you need to sit here and you need to ask God, like I said last week. Sit there, ask God, show me in which ways do I feel inferior to people or I feel superior to people, and how am I showing up in these spaces? Because people aren't going to tell you, you know, you act like you're a little bit better than them, or not even better. Sometimes it's an energy. It's this, and I'm not into those whole energy, don't get me wrong, but it is. It's like this energy. It's this way you can show up and you don't even know it. We're off, or it can be from the beginning. I don't even really want to connect with them because you assume that this person feels like they're superior, and they might not. And we have to use every opportunity to be God's light, to take our ministry further. And when I say ministry, like I said, everyone doesn't preach, everyone doesn't speak, everyone doesn't write a blog, but it is about whatever your assignment is, getting your assignment and now growing that. And this applies no matter what you are. You can be called to be a basketball coach, you can be called to be a teacher, you can be called to be the CEO of this company, you could be called to start some nonprofit, you could be a missionary, you could be a model, a singer, a dancer, whatever God's called you to be. We don't want to have barriers on ourselves because we have not let go the subconscious ways of thinking about our superiority or inferiority in different groups. So bottom line is, I want to be like Paul. Ultimately, we want to be like Jesus. But in this example of Peter and Paul, I want to be like Paul. I want to say, like, listen, there's no limits, God. Let's do it. Whatever you want me to do, whoever the people are. And I'll look at them as, these are your people. These are your children. So thank you guys for another segment of Church Girls Chats. I'm Jasmine Ford, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.